Hello there Scapers, my name is Zenobilis and today I'm actually very happy. This time last week I got the base pet back and 1 week later I get the second best thing that could ever happen to anyone in RuneScape. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but I'm very happy to see the release of Revolution Plus in the game. For those of you who don't know what this is, Revolution will now work with ultimates and thresholds alongside basic abilities, and you'll be able to extend your Revolution area to more than just the first 8 slots on your action bar. So this opens up a ton of new avenues, and the first thing I did when I logged in was try and figure out the optimal orientation of ultimates, thresholds and basics. And the general idea is, especially if you're going to be AFKing something, I think is to put your ultimate first, your best 2 thresholds second and third, and then your basics in the best order that you used before this update. So that's my thinking. Obviously it will depend a lot on the situation, and there may be several different optimal action bars based on your situation, but also one pretty good action bar that can be used in most situations. So the first place I tried to go and test it out was at Moss Golems. These are actually quite fun to kill because even though they melee you, they are very slow moving, so they take a while to get to you. It's one of the higher level monsters where Revolution Plus I think can be actually pretty useful. Maybe not the way I'm using it right now. I have tweaked it a little bit, but it definitely can be very useful if you get it right. The action bar you see on screen follows the principles that I mentioned earlier, whereby you put the Sunshine first, Wild Magic and Asphyxiate second and third, and then your optimal basic ability bar. Not quite optimal here, I probably need to tweak it a bit. In fact, I think I forgot one main ability, which is Sonic Wave, but essentially it's really good. I do like Revolution Plus, not necessarily for Moss Golems specifically, but in general. For Moss Golems, the key is to soul split when they're far away from you so that they can't hit you, and for that you do need to pay attention, and Revolution Plus isn't great for that. But for the fact that you do quite a bit of DPS, in fact your DPS levels are pretty much on par with what you might do, say if you were casually slaying with full manual or the old Revolution, plus manually using thresholds and ultimates. So the difference is minimal, but what Revolution Plus doesn't do is give you the benefit of timing and intelligent decision making when it comes to using abilities. So getting the timing right. So for example, if Moss Golem's almost dead, you don't want to waste your Asphyxiate on it, so just use a basic such as Sacrifice to kill it off and heal itself. If a Moss Golem is coming too close to you, you want to be able to use stuns on it so that it slows down, for example Asphyxiate, and obviously you don't have control over that. So this isn't, it's not going to be that useful if you need to, use certain abilities at certain times, but generally it's pretty good. I did change my action bar later on when I figured out that I forgot Sonic Wave, but the main problem I ran into at these guys especially was that because I needed to actively use certain abilities at certain times in order to, not use up too much food and things like that, and soul split, it wasn't particularly useful in this scenario. And the only reason I really was at Moss Golems was because I needed the soul for my Slayer Codex. These are pretty high level monsters. I don't think they were intended to just, be revolutioned to death. But interestingly enough, there were a few glitches earlier today, I believe. One of them was to do with basics not activating, so your character would just sit at doing auto attacks if your thresholds and ultimates were on cooldown, so that was quite funny. And another thing was, which I imagine could have been quite deadly, especially in PvP scenarios, was that if someone put their special attack ability on their action bar, that would activate, which would not only drain your adrenaline but also be really deadly. But why would you put it on your action bar? I believe those have been fixed now, so that's good. What I did learn as time went on was that I needed to extend my action bar, which you can do now up to your full length, and that means take away your food, put it on a different action bar, leave more space on your primary action bar for abilities, because you want to take full advantage of Revolution and you don't want to be wasting your time by standing around when all your abilities are on cooldown and you haven't expanded out your active area to the entire action bar. So that's something you also want to be aware of. But generally speaking, I have no doubt that at most Slayer creatures this will be an absolute blessing for people who want to AFK it, except at high level monsters such as at moss golems and other grove creatures and things like that, maybe slayer mobs as well, where you do need a bit more strategy and timing and things to survive and get the best rates. Now, one of the best use cases of Revolution++ in my opinion is with AOE AFK Melee, especially Slayer. For example, corrupted creatures with aggro pots on. So previously, before Revolution++ came out, what used to be the case was that you would be able to AFK these guys pretty easily, except for the fact that you had to use 3 abilities manually: Berserker or Meteor Strike, Quake and Hurricane. Everything else would be fairly manual, and you could AFK it apart from these 3 things. Now, because you can put these 3 abilities in the first 3 slots of your action bar, this has become extremely useful and very, very easy now. And you can pretty much AFK it with what I'm wearing here. So Vamp Scrimshaw, Vamp Aura, and Protect from Melee. All you probably need to do is check back in on your character to make sure they haven't run out of prayer or run out of overloads and are getting absolutely wrecked. And I wish this update came out earlier, especially when air roots used to be the best way of training invention, because this was basically the way people used to do air roots. Although this is one of the best use cases of Revolution++, there are still a couple of things that I had to change. Number one was obviously I had to expand out my action bar so that I could include more abilities. Now, I'm not quite sure, but I think this is probably the right way to go. Correct me if you think otherwise, but I think you should only put your ultimate in the first slot and your top 2 thresholds in your second and third slots, and the next 5 should be filled with your top 5 basic abilities, and then you want to put your remaining thresholds. That's my idea behind it. I don't want to put, say, my assault in my number 4 slot, because assault is nowhere near as good as Quake and Hurricane when you're fighting multiple monsters and you don't want to waste your adrenaline on it. Again, remember that this isn't an intelligent system in the sense that if a monster is on low HP, it's not gonna stop your character from using Meteor Strike, which would just be an utter and complete waste, especially if you're only attacking one monster. So in that regard, you do still want to pay attention for the best XP rates, but obviously your XP rates and kill rates have increased dramatically thanks to this update. So I'm still trying to figure out the best position to put your, say, your 3rd and 4th priority thresholds. I think it's probably best to put them near the end, but I don't know. We'll have to see. It will depend on the situation as well, as with many things. But from a general standpoint, I think it's better to put them near the end. But more importantly, I get really annoyed when I see my character not being able to use any abilities because they're all on cooldown. So I would probably expand out my action bar to include a few like really bad basic abilities like Slice and Punish. Put them at the very, very end, just as fillers in case everything is on cooldown. Hopefully that won't be the case though. Oh, and I also removed Fury. So this is a general problem with Revolution, not something that was introduced as a result of Revolution++, but something that has been a problem with Revolution for a while now. That's to do with channeled abilities. So there's a little bit of a delay after a channeled ability, which isn't the case if you use things manually. So that decreases the effectiveness of Revolution. So I removed Fury. In fact, with Fury, you don't even want to use all of it. You only want to use the first hit for optimal DPS. So I wouldn't put Fury on my action bar even if they fixed this problem. But generally speaking, for things like Asphyxiate or Tendrils or things like that, or Snipe. Snipe is a really good example where there's a big delay after the end of Snipe's animation before your character continues with Revolution. So things like that, they do need fixing. They probably not worth putting on your action bar. But again, without doing all the calculations, I'm not sure. Next, I did raids. Bit of a jump, I'd say. A bit of a jump from casual Slayer to raids with the Revolution bar. But let's be honest, a lot of people do raids with Revolution even before this update, and now because of this update things have become so much easier for them. With raids, the main problem, especially for beginners, has always been the fact that they need to DPS to succeed at the same time as not dying and being aware of everything that's going around them. At Beastmaster this can be really chaotic, so Revolution++ really does help here. Now, one thing that I noticed personally personally was that I don't want to put my ultimate up front. Because I'm meleeing, if I zerked all the time, every time zerk was active, I'd probably kill myself due to the amount of damage I was taking. I want to be selective in when I use zerk so that I minimize the damage I'm taking. But that's with zerk. Generally, I would say that it's probably a good idea to put your ultimates in your number 1 position, like I did with Slayer Revolution ++ rather than Bossing Revolution ++. But with meleeing, I wouldn't say that was the case. You want to use it manually. And the reason for that is obviously pretty simple. With raids, it's almost always about just DPSing. So you want to use ultimates as soon as they are off cooldown. So that's why you want to put your ultimate in your number 1 position. The problem remains for me in my mind as to whether you want to put more than just 2 thresholds in the number 2 and 3 slots, or you want to put them at the end. I would say that for raids where it's not all about AOE abilities and AOE attacks, you still want to use things like assault. So I would put like at least 3 thresholds up front, but again, it's down to personal preference and whether or not you put your ultimate at the start. If I put my ultimate at the start, I would probably put my lesser thresholds at the end. If I didn't put my ultimate at the start, I would put more than 2 thresholds at the start, followed by basics. So that's my thinking behind it. Again, I wouldn't rely on it too much at bossing, but definitely very reliable. Your average DPS will go up, that's for sure, especially with a team of learners. And it's going to be really useful for learners as well, because they can relax, take their time, and focus on the mechanics of the boss rather than concentrating on DPS all the time. At Yakamaru especially, I'd say it's probably better to put your ultimate at the start at Yakamaru, because there's so much going on that it can be really overwhelming. And because it's a long fight as well, you've got to stay on top of your game all the time. So a Revolution ++ here is even more useful and hopefully will bring more success to teams in general at raids. He says, as you remember, is about the guy who was fixated on stun pool today and almost killed the team because he forgot that it was part of his revolution now. Now, I didn't have to hammer here, so I certainly found it very useful to be able to use Revolution ++, especially as a meleeer where you gotta concentrate on so many things. It's quite relaxing not having to worry about using certain abilities at certain times. At Yakamaru, more than at Beastmaster, I'd say it is all about DPS. And one of the biggest problems with the beginner teams is that there isn't enough DPS, simply because people aren't focusing on it. With Revolution ++, given that you use your ultimate and thresholds at the start and your basics later on, you'll be absolutely fine. And I believe there'll be more successful beginner teams. So if ever there was a time to try out raids as a beginner, this is it with Revolution ++. I'm sure there are a lot of people working on optimal ability bars and things like that, so I don't want to go into that too much, but once they do, and I'm sure they will if you have a look at Reddit, try and adopt some of them. You can even adopt some of the ones I've been showing you. They're not too shabby, although they're not perfect. I don't think they're perfect. So yeah, and at Yakamaru especially, you probably also want to put stuff like Devotion and Freedom on your action bar as a beginner, so you don't have to use them manually. So that's where the expansion of your action bar area or your revolution area comes in very handy, because you can put more stuff on your action bar as long as you order it properly. Remember though that by moving things around so much, you probably lost track of your keybinds, so you can make sure the same abilities are bound to the same keys by changing the keybinds, not changing the position of the abilities. So that's something I didn't realize until now, so I'm probably going to do that next time I log in, just to make sure everything's there, rather than having to change my ability bar for every different situation. I'll probably just change my keybinds to make things easier for myself and still keep that muscle memory of using abilities in certain orders intact from before this update, because changing which abilities are associated to which key is actually pretty demanding on your brain. It'll take some time to get used to if you do that. The better way is to change the keybinds. All in all, what do I think of it? Well, I am very happy with the update. especially for the two things I mentioned. Slayer, especially melee Slayer, but also bossing, such as raids. Now, I did die at both Beastmaster and Yakamaru, but it wasn't because of Revolution Plus Plus, rest assured. In fact, I probably did better because of Revolution Plus Plus, because I'm one of those people who gets easily distracted and can't concentrate on too many things at once, and I die a lot anyway. But this time I died because I failed my prayer switching. Nothing to do with Revolution, guys, just my incompetence. But yeah, just a few things that Jagex need to improve. Probably the most important thing is to add a toggle option, because a lot of people want to be able to use the old Revolution, or want to be able to use, say, only thresholds with Revolution, not ultimates, or only basics like it was the case. So Mod Shawnee has said that they will be fixing that soon and giving you options as to which abilities fall under Revolution, which will be very useful. I'm glad they expanded the action bar area, because that was one of the worries I had with this update, because the first 8 slots simply isn't enough if you're going to be using ultimates and thresholds alongside everything. But one thing that really does need fixing, and I don't think it's in their sights, it will take a lot of work, is to remove the delays after channeled abilities. Nothing to do with Revolution, like I said, but something they do need to fix regardless. My final word on it would be that it came at absolutely the perfect time for me. Why do I say that? It's because I'm starting my road to Insane Final Boss, and I need to get a lot of pets. And for the bosses where I could have semi-AFK'd them with Revolution and spamming thresholds and ultimates, now I can almost entirely AFK them while pet hunting and watching YouTube or whatever. So for me personally, I would much rather AFK something if I can help it, as long as it doesn't disadvantage me massively in terms of XP rates or kills per hour or things like that. Definitely with Revolution Plus Plus it doesn't. So I'm going to be getting a lot of my pets with Revolution Plus Plus, a lot of my lower level boss pets such as KBD or Cowfight Queen and things like that. I'm very happy with it. I'm looking forward to it. I hope they patch the things that they promised to patch soon. I'm going to be working out my optimal ability bars and things like that. And hopefully soon I will have my perfect ability bar for each of the 3 styles for all situations, and doing a little bit of tweaking should hopefully get it there. So that's my goal over the next few days. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you take advantage of Revolution Plus Plus and the new legacy and special attack damage buff. Wink wink. Have a look in the description, guys. And I will see you in the next one, which should be a video tomorrow.